Hello, brilliant 3D jewelry channel. Welcome to this new video. Today we have these two photographs of my hands taken with my cell phone. I'm a jeweler. What's happening? We have no jewels here. And we have this 3D jewel with model in Blender last week. Obviously today we want to integrate this 3D jewel into these photographs. The task might look easy at first, but obviously if you've tried it, you know it's a lot harder than it looks. This tutorial has been requested so many times, and finally, here we are. Let's get started. First, some advice. If you need to do this job, it's because a jewelry brand or a jewelry client is requesting that you integrate the 3D jewels into photographies. The most reasonable situation should be that the client is providing the photographs, and they should be high quality, high resolution photographs made by a professional photographer. You should not work on crappy pictures taken with your crappy cell phone. So obviously for training purposes, this is great because this is the worst you could get. So if you can do it right on crappy pictures, you'll get it right on high resolution, high quality pictures. And first, you should prepare the photographs for the artistic look that you're going for. Use any software that you like. Here, I'm going to remove some of the red. I'm going to make this one a sepia tone. Then I'm going to adjust the contrast to have a more dramatic look. Save this and be happy. Now I'm going to work on this other angle. Here I'm going to make it black and white and slightly adjust the contrast. Then I'm going to add a vignette effect like this. Save and be happy. And obviously don't forget to export your image. I'm going to export it as a PNG. Choose a resolution that suits you and export the second one. Okay, so now let's open Blender and let's go ahead and open your file with your 3D jewel that you want to integrate into the photograph. First, we're going to set up the camera. So let's go add camera. Let's center the camera there. We're going to make the view per display bigger for the camera, 150. Let's move it up somewhere there. Obviously, there's much to do for the angle of the camera. We'll check that later. Good. Now let's add mesh plane. Put it at 0. Now for the dimension of this plane, we're going to give it the resolution of our picture. This picture is 6000 per 4505 pixels. So let's give it the same dimension, even if these are not pixels. Now here for the viewport display, go to view and put a much bigger and clip right there so you can see your big plane. Now take the camera and put the resolution of the image 6000 pixels on X and 4505 pixels on Y. Now go to camera view, also the clip end for the camera, put a much bigger number here. And now we need to move the camera up. Now let's match the position of the camera with the exact size of the plane. You can zoom in and be very precise. It's very easy to do this visually. You'll have no problems. Hold the plane, photo, background. Save and be happy. Now let's go to shading, material, new material. Call this photo background. We're going to bring an image texture, plug the color to the base color, open your photograph. Now let's go to a render preview. So we have the image on the plane. We have to start somewhere and somehow. Now, very important, this image is just going to be a placeholder. So let's go to Object, Visibility, and remove it from Diffuse, Glossy, Transmission, Volume, Scatter, and Shadow, only visible to the camera. Now we're going to add Input Texture Coordinate, plug camera to Vector. Now let's add a vector mapping here at the middle. Go to the camera view. Now the scale on the x-axis is going to be 1 divided by the x resolution, that's 6000. Then on the y-axis, 1 divided by the y resolution, 4505 here. Now the location, 0.5 on x and y. These little nodes are going to be very important later, and I will explain later their function exactly. For now, save, and be happy. Now, what we can do already is select our jewel. It's right there, very small generally because the image is a lot bigger for now. So let's scale our jewel. And what we're going to do is start the jewel in position on our photograph. Obviously, you can hit R 2 times, RR, to gumball rotate your jewel. And here I'm inside the plane. That's pretty practical because it hides the jewel when it goes under it. Obviously, that's not enough to make a good integration, but it's already helpful. Obviously, zoom in and move the ring. Go back to the camera view, scale, move, rotate. So obviously the jewel must match the orientation, perspective, and scale of the photograph. It's going to help a lot knowing the real size of the jewel and the real size of something inside the photography that's been provided to you. Then, and more than the technical numbers, it's important to have an artistic feeling. We still need creativity to make it work in the end result. This position is good for now. Save and be happy. Now we're going to create some illumination. World, environment, texture, and we're going to use the same image that we are integrating. So mine is this one. Okay, so my image is not a real HDR. It doesn't have a dynamic range. So even if it's just a PNG, it's going to work really great to create the general light for our 3D jewelry scene. But let's go to world here in the shader nodes. What we can do is add a color, brightness, and contrast. I'm going to put contrast to 0.5, and then I'm going to go to add color HSV right there and tweak my saturation. This is good to begin with because anyway, we need to create the materials, and then it's all about balancing the lighting and the materials shaders. Let's go back to object and let's start working on the materials. Okay, so let's select the ring. Let's go to materials. New material. First one is going to be rose gold. Then we're going to have pearls. And then we're going to have peridot. That's a nice light yellow green gemstone. Now let's go to edit mode. Let's select everything and assign the rose gold to everything first. Now let's select everything, Alt A. Now the pearls. Select with L. So here I have 3 pearls there, and let's take the pearl and assign. Okay, now the gems. This one, and I think that's about it. Okay, so let's grab the peridot and assign to these 2 gems. Don't forget to use flat shading for the gems. Exit edit mode. Let's go back to camera view. Okay, rose gold, add input RGB. Let's plug it to base color. Now let's add an ambient occlusion right there. Now metallic 1, roughness 0.1. So for the rose gold, let's start with a color that we think is close to what we need. Then add a color HSV node, tweak the hue and the saturation as needed, and the value to make it lighter or darker. So right here, by example, there's something going on. The original gold for this design, this double finger ring, is rose gold. But honestly, I'm not going to like it in this situation. I'm going to go for yellow gold because I want color contrast, and I'm going to diverge from the original design. In this occasion, this is not a problem at all because I am the designer and the client for this photo integration. But you might face such problems with the client. And if the client does not want to listen to artistic advice, many times the client is obviously in his own right to be stubborn. Well, you'll make it rose gold as decided and indicated by the client. But here, I don't like the fact that rose gold is looking way too much as my sepia photograph. So I'm going to go for yellow gold, and I'm going to tweak it to something like this. For now, I have to begin somewhere with the colors, with the materials. Save and be happy, and let's proceed with the other materials. So now the pearls. Let's go at metallic 0.85, roughness 0.4. Now add input RGB to base color, add ambient occlusion, adapt the color, add an HSV node right there. You can make the value a lot stronger if necessary. That's what I like in cycles. You can use the value actually to create light from the HSV node. That's a little trick, just so you know. So tweak the value depending your scene, and then tweak the distance of the ambient occlusion 5 here. Now let's go to the peridot gemstone. So for gemstone, very important, use the real IOR 168 for the peridot index of refraction. Metallic, very slight metallic on the gems. And actually, let's go see the peridot right there. Obviously, roughness 0. Then add input RGB, plug it to base color, add input ambient occlusion right there, and add color HSV here. So peridot is somewhere like this. And very important, obviously, the transmission weight to 1 for our refractions. Obviously, let's go to render settings, the denoise to open image using GPU, everything to accurate and high. Same for viewport and render settings there. Then light path, I have already 256 by default on every setting there. The rest for now, we're not changing the clamping nor the filter glossy. That's good. Okay, and here just color management. I'm using the default filmic sRGB. Most of the pictures that we're going to work with between most medias and softwares are sRGB, most of them. So here I'm not going to fiddle and meddle and modify the color management system. I'm going to use the filmic sRGB. All my pictures are PNGs, and the devices used to take photographs, the software used to transfer the images are all working linearly with sRGB. But obviously, depending the clients, the studios, the professionals that you're going to work with, you might encounter different color spaces, and you will have to work and tweak the color management between softwares and devices. Again, beware. Color management is often an issue. Okay, so now just a couple of things. You might add an input bevel on the gem. Some people like a slight bevel. It goes on the normal node here. Tweak the samples, tweak the amount. Obviously not too much, otherwise your gem is going to look way too worn out, and it will look bad. Now here, I'm not creating inclusion in the gems. They're crystal clear gems. Obviously, you can create inclusions for the gems, or you can use my ultimate gemstone asset. You can find it on Blender Market. It has all the details and natural inclusions for the gems. Don't forget to tweak the distance of the ambient occlusion depending your scene. Too much is going to be way too dark. Not enough, it's going to be way too light. So I like some contrast. Let's go at 15 on the gems. On the gold, here again, you can add a bevel node to the normal, tweak the sample, tweak the radius. It's all depending the scale of your objects. Tweak the samples on the ambient occlusion. I'm using the highest settings, and the distance again, I'm going to go at 10. Okay. Then keep tweaking the color of the gold. That's enough for now. Save and be happy. Okay, so this is all pretty and nice and easy, but it's important to know that we are not going to use this plane, and we're going to set the background. So let's go to render properties. Let's go to film transparent, because obviously the job is far from being done. Our plane here is just to localize the jewel into the photograph, and we need to model something. In this case, by example, I need to model part of the fingers. So let's go to layout and let's start making the real work. Having the camera view and the jewel and the photograph reference already in place is obviously going to help us a lot. Add mesh plane. Okay, edit mode. So where are we? The z-axis. Let's go over our initial plane. Okay, so delete those vertices anyway, and let's start. Control left mouse click. So let's start with the finger here. Let's follow this finger and let's take the jewel into account, obviously. And we need to model the finger because we need shadows and reflections and masking some parts of the ring. So in fact, here we need to mask the ring. And to do that, we need to model part of the hand. You don't need to model the entire hand but anyway, we need to make a nice shape. Okay, so remember that the weight of the jewel does bend the skin. So we're going to take that into account. For example, here I'm going to subdivide a bit more. We obviously need to follow the photograph because realism, but also we need to understand that the jewel is making an action on the skin somehow, somewhere, to add some details here and there. Okay, so follow the finger. Here I will have to go further on the hand. Okay, I'm going to select everything with A. I'm going to extrude. And something important before I continue, I'm going to move it on the Z-axis to the ring, to the 3D jewel. And obviously the scale is going to change. So it's important that you start putting this part of the modeling at the correct position on the Z-axis. Here you must be inside the ring. This second row needs to follow the shape of the finger in 3D, okay? And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to follow this first part of the ring, and then I'm going to adapt to the rest of the shape of the ring. Okay, so you need to start somewhere for your 3D model of your hand and finger. Okay, here, to do this, to have nice shadows, nice reflections. Otherwise, you might get artifacts, and you want to avoid that. We need to be precise, but don't exaggerate. So let's keep extruding and staying inside of the ring. So how far do I need to go? Halfway there, that's generally pretty good enough. Now, this side, I'm going to go a bit lower, 1 time, 2 times. Okay, we're good. So check that you're on camera view so that the scale of your model is good. Don't forget to hide the plane now and then. Okay, so here, let's select this vertex, turn on proportional editing, and make the area of effect bigger with the middle wheel of your mouse. And let's come closer to the ring. Not too far, but far enough, especially for the shadows to reach far enough to integrate the 3D model into your photography. Okay, so you keep adapting to the image. Sometimes you'll have to turn off the proportional editing and make the corrections that you need vertex by vertex. Okay. The topology. The topology is important because again, with the bad topology, your shadows are going to be wrong for the photograph integration and the reflections will be wrong. So make a decent enough topology following your real life image. At first, you're going to overwork everything. You'll take hours and days to do this properly. It's normal, it's part of learning. So don't worry. At first, it's more important to train properly and then understand what details matter and what details are not even relevant for what you're doing. Okay, now obviously here where I have the leaf, I'm completely inside the ring and that's really bad. Proportional editing. We're going to work on the Z-axis this time and we're going to come inside the jewel, okay? Because obviously the skin is never going to penetrate the gold. That would not be good. I can rotate also and scale if necessary. Don't be too far away. Like I said earlier, it is important that the topology follows the real shape of the finger in this case. Don't forget to check the camera view. Okay. So obviously avoid having this by example. I'm exaggerating to make the example. That would not be good at all. Take care of your topology. That's the message. Okay, so work on your topology and 3D model here of the parts that you need to have shadows, reflections. And clearly we are going to use a subdivision surface modifier at least level 3. So it's smooth. Let's do a shade smooth. So here I can adapt my topology now that the modifier is in action. So maybe you need to do some wrinkles sometimes. This part of the work is the really important part for properly integrating the 3D model to the photograph. Sometimes you will have to model a lot of details to have a nice result. Okay, this is the first finger. Check several angles. Now, let's go to materials. And the material is going to be photo background on the finger. And now you understand why I set the material to the camera view. So the shading is going to get the finger. And what we can do now that the material is here, we can go to edit mode and adapt the details that we need here and there. And sometimes, by example here, the finger is going inside the ring. But if I go to camera view, it's looking good and I'm getting this shadow that I want. So now it's more important to work on what I see based on what I need, based on the final goal, than things that we won't see in the end result. And here, by example, even if we're going inside the gold, it doesn't matter anymore. So here now we can see we have a shading issue. Let's go to shading and let's see what we need to adapt. So I'm going to make a copy of the material. Okay, let's adapt the roughness 1. So what I'm going to do is that the background material, I'm going to use the same roughness. So the colors match between the background and the rest. But now here what we can do is we can go to object properties, shadow catcher. So obviously the background is going to be PNG alpha or AXR, any format with alpha. And now here on this material, you can add some ambient occlusion and work on the distance. We can even see in the reflections that the shadow is now going to reflect into the gold and the other materials. So that's why you need to 3D model several aspects of the things that are interacting with the jewel in the photography to get proper shadows and get proper reflections and get a much more professional photo integration of your jewel. Sometimes you need to test things that are not necessarily very logical, but by example, if I use the metallic to 1, we can see that the reflections and the shadow on my 3D finger are better. So I'm going to keep metallic to 1. And actually here we can already see the shadow that my 3D finger is catching. And it's important that your material for your 3D object, even if they're going to be invisible shadow catchers, do have the proper colors set to them for the reflections and the indirect light that this 3D object is creating in the reflection and the general light of your scene. So by example, if I would be creating, let's say, a very simple skin material like this here, this would not be good enough because we can clearly see that using the camera setting I used and projecting the image from the camera angle on my 3D object, I get all the details from the photograph, and that's going to reflect on your 3D jewel. And that's why we are here with this tutorial today. Okay, so here I made 1 finger, and obviously I still need to make the 2nd finger and maybe even the 3rd finger. Even if the little pinky is far away from the ring, maybe it's getting some shadow and making some reflections into my jewel. So I'm going to keep working on the modeling. I'm going to model more fingers. I'm going to use exactly the same dynamic. Let's get to work. I will be back soon. So I have completed the modeling. I've made 4 fingers with the correct volume. If I go to render preview, these are my fingers. So it's important that you model this properly, because if you zoom on any detail and you remove the 3D object, you can clearly see there is a very big difference in the reflections and the shadows that are reflected into your jewel. So the modeling part of the supporting 3D model for the photography integration is the biggest part of the job. And obviously, many people don't know that. So obviously, it's important that you learn and practice this because that's going to make the biggest difference for a professional 3D jewelry integration. Good. Now we need to learn what elements we need to render and the proper settings to save the images that we're going to use to make the integration. And for now, save and be happy. And first, the depth of field. So let's set that up. Add empty plane axis, call it DOF. Now for the position, for me, it's around this pearl here. So let's put your depth of field in place. You need to be very precise. Here I'm going to be at the surface of the pearl. Go back to the camera view, select the camera, camera settings, turn the depth of field on, focus on object DOF. Now for the f-stop, let's input something very small. Obviously this is exaggerated a lot, but we can see the effect in action. Now it's all about finding the proper value. I want some slight depth of field here at the front parts of the ring. This is nice. Save and be happy. Now for the render output. So the resolution, remember, that's the size of our original photography. I'm going to put it at 200%. I'm going to be around 16K. That will allow me to reframe the image if necessary. So the output, the format, I'm going to use PNG because I was working with PNG since the beginning. Some other file format that is often used in this type of operation is the OpenAXR. And just so you know, the occasions where the OpenAXR is necessary is when you want colored transparent shadows. And yes, in jewelry that happens pretty often when you have a lot of gemstones and they project their colors on the skin, by example. And the PNG format won't allow you to save colored alphas. So you will need the OpenAXR for colored alphas. Okay, but today I don't have that problem. Too bad for you if you have it today. You'll have to study some more about the OpenAXR capabilities compared to the PNG's capabilities. The color RGBA, because yes, we are going to use the alpha. Compression 0%. If you need compression, do it at the end of the entire process. Don't meddle with compression during your workflow. Bad practice. So compression 0. Now, render settings. So for the samples, you need to test the quality you need, depending also your hardware and things like that. But remember that nowadays the denoiser on the GPU and especially the open image denoiser on accurate, high quality, albedo and normal, all the settings to the max, will do a great work. And also anyway, we will want some noise in our render. But anyway, I'm not going to exaggerate the samples because yes, we will add noise to the image, some dust and things like that. So this is good for the render settings. Now, the elements, the background plane goes away. Remove it from the render. Now, the fingers or whatever you've modeled to support your 3D jewel. Let's go to object properties. So at first, and beware, it's not going to be shadow catcher at first because at first I want the ring. So we need a holdout. So it hides what we don't see from the ring. The hand is hiding parts of the jewel. But we're still missing an important element. Okay, so now that you know that this is going to be a holdout, bring back the fingers, bring back the background, and there's an element that maybe you want to add to our scene. And these are light sources. I'm going to add a light point light, and from the camera position, I'm going to put it around here, check the height to match the illumination from the original photograph. Remember that the shadows and light that we have now all come from the HDR that we are using, and we are using the original photograph. But sometimes that's not enough to have some hot spots and darker shadows. Here's my point light. Let's go to settings. First, let's go with any power here, 8500. Use node yes. Put any strengths you like. Exaggerate this. Now for the fingers here, in this situation, we're going to go back to shadow catcher. And what we're going to do now, go back to the point light, adapt the size depending on how sharp or soft you want the shadows, and work on the position. Softer shadows, so the radius of the light can be very big depending the scale of your scene, the effect of the point light. Sometimes instead of the point light, you might want to use the area light and change the shape maybe to ellipse with a different scale. Don't forget to give it a proper size and orientation. Let's go back to render preview. I prefer the result from the area light. Keep adapting the settings of your light. And now, say goodbye to the background again. Select your fingers, set them back to holdout. Now we're ready to render. Let's go for F12 and let's watch the render in process. So this is a 16K render. We can already have a look at our details here and there. Let's have a look at the gem, the peridot. Here it has some depth of field. Okay, so this is the result. Don't forget to save your image. So it's going to be a PNG with the alpha. Here, this is render ring by itself. Save image and be happy. Now we need something different. We need the shadows. So the fingers, let's go to object properties, are not going to be a holdout anymore. They're going to be a shadow catcher. But now what we're going to do is that the ring is going to be a holdout now. So I will get the shadows by themselves. And that's generally better if I want to modify and edit the image of the shadows with brushes, by example. That happens. It's also an important part of the process. So the ring is going to be a holdout. Save before rendering, F12. So here, generally, when you have only a shadow catcher with transparent background and holdouts, you're not going to see a lot in the render. But generally, you should see at this point if the shadows that you're getting correspond to the perspective of the original photography, the shape and orientation of the jewel, the depth of field. If something is wrong, you might already detect it now. This is the result of the shadow catcher. Image, save. These are shadows. Save image and be happy. And this is great, but we still have a problem for the realism of our operation of integration of this 3D jewel into our original photography. See, in real life, something that is going to happen here is that the jewel is going to reflect light mainly in the form of metallic caustics or angel rays, as I like to call them. And as a result, here now we are missing that indirect light, these bounces of metallic light over the shadows, because the shadows are affected by the bouncing light from our polished jewels and materials on the fingers. And obviously, if we want a very nice professional result, we need to generate the render of that indirect light here in Cycles 4.3. So to do that, the ring is going to be a holdout. The fingers are going to be just normal. So no shadow catcher, no holdout. Here, let's go to render settings. So here what we need to change is that the indirect light that generally gets clamped won't get clamped. So let's go at 0. And the filter glossy default is 1. Needs to be 0 also. Now the samples, we need a lot of samples. I'm going to go at 4 times 600. That's barely enough. And we're going to go to view layer passes. And for the light, we're going to ask the diffuse indirect. That's enough. It's another pass that's going to render along the rest, and we'll get the result at the end. Oh, and something very important, turn off the denoiser for this operation. So save before rendering, so you stay happy. because sometimes it crashes for any reason. So if you saved just before rendering, you will be happy either way. F12 for the render. So obviously this render is going to be a bit slower. And at first, we're not going to see anything interesting. Quite the opposite. We're going to see our 3D model of the hand without the jewel, without any caustics or angel rays or whatever, indirect light or global light or whatever. But we need to have faith in the process because, like I said, the indirect light pass that we asked for is going to be delivered at the end. So be patient and hold the line. Go take a coffee or a tea or cuddle your cat. Stay happy and stay patient. So this is the result, and we need to go to this combine here and get the diffuse indirect light result. This is what we get. So like I said, the amount of sample that I use is barely enough, but we're seeing some benefits here, some angel rays, some metallic bounces from the gold of the ring on the fingers. Obviously, we also have indirect light on all the fingers. So to avoid that in our final indirect diffuse light bounces, what we're going to do for the fingers, let's go to ray visibility and remove them from the diffuse rays here. So what I'm going to do also is that I'm going to use a lot more samples. Now let's go to F12. So obviously, if you stay on the diffuse indirect pass, you're going to get the result live. Obviously, with this amount of samples, it's going to be even slower, but the quality is all that matters. So this is the new result. We can see that this is clearly an improved result. Metallic bounces here on the fingers. For now, don't forget to image save, indirect bounces, and be happy. All right, so now we have all the images. For the next step, that's the compositing. So you would think, let's go to compositing in Blender. But let's take the bounces image by example. So here on the image, we can see that we have things that we don't want. We don't want that sharp ending of the fingers and things like that. So it means that I will have to edit this image with brushes. I will have to paint the image and modify the image in an image edition software. And well, that's something that you can't do in Blender because Blender is for many other excellent things. Okay, so today I will be using CorelDraw. You can use any software you like. Let's see what needs to be done to complete the integration of our 3D jewel to our original photography. Okay, so first let's bring our images to our image edition software. Take your original photography here. Take the render of the ring. Overlap it to your original image. So this should already look good thanks to all the work we did earlier and the step and the method we used. Let's bring the shadows, overlap and scale. Obviously, the shadows must be under the ring render. So we get this. What you can do to see the effect of the image is to hide it and show it, to see if there's something that you don't like. And by example here, I don't like these shadows on the little pinky right there. So here what I can do is add some transparency to correct that problem there. This is a bit better because obviously there's more distance to the pinky and the shadow would not get there at the tip. I like some slight shadow of this leaf here. I don't need to do much. So normally you won't have to do a lot more when making the composition between these images. Now let's bring the metallic bounces. So let's overlap and scale. Now this image needs to be under the ring render, but over the rest. Now here I need a gradient transparency to limit the range of this image and have a smooth transition. And I'm going to change the type of transparency to add. So obviously the light from this image is adding to the rest because the metallic bounces are bringing light. Now also I'm going to edit the strength of the transparency. At the beginning, I needed to be a bit more transparent, maybe 45%. You need to test this. find the range that you want. Sometimes what I do is I copy and paste this image. I duplicate this image, bring it under the ring again to get specific metallic bounces to stand out more, like these ones on the left side of the flower. So this completes the general compositing process. From here, there are many artistic decisions that you will have to take. You can obviously reframe and adapt the composition of the photography. You can decide that you can apply the same sepia tone to the render of the ring, the shadows, and the metallic bounces. If you want absolute realism, you will also have to add some layers of dust over the render of the ring because this render looks way too clean. But by example, for a marketing campaign of my jewelry designs, I decided that I want the jewels to stand out. So I like the color contrast between the gold and the sepia tone that I gave to the photograph on purpose. You might like it, you might not like it. You'll take your own decisions for your own business and activities. I like the contrast because obviously people are going to look at the jewels, at the designs, and that's what I want. This is it for today's tutorial. This tutorial was the 3D jewelry model photography integration in Blender Cycles 4.3. Thanks for supporting my work, becoming members of my channel, or buying my assets on Blender Market Superhive. Don't forget to take care of yourself. Be nice to animals. Take care of the planet. Have a nice day and see you soon.